You crawled out of your bed like a zombie. Your room was dark, probably one of the darkest rooms inside the digital circus. Honestly, it had taken weeks of convincing, but Kane finally caved, and he despawned the powerful lamps on your ceiling. The good thing was that the darkness allowed you to sleep, deeply and peacefully. But due to the digital circus being the digital circus, sleeping was exhausting. It was like a reverse. Being awake filled you with energy. Sleeping drained it. Probably a sort of failsafe to ensure everyone is not just sleeping all day. Either way, you were beat. Yet overslept, of course. But that was a given for you. You slipped from under your sheets down on the floor, slowly making your way to your dresser. You finally got up on your feet. Your clothes were a cruel joke. There were all these flowy, thin white summer dresses that revealed the silhouette of your slender figure when lights were shining behind you. It was embarrassing to walk around in these. You took out your straw sun hat and sunglasses as well, pushing them as far back as you could. You then stepped towards your door, mentally preparing yourself for the light. Your hand took hold of the knob, twisting it open. As expected, the lights were overbearing, even with the sunglasses, but you were somewhat used to that. Leaning to your right, you picked up your parcel. The thing was adorable, made out of black shiny wood with a colorful leaf pattern. Probably your favorite digital circus possession. The only problem was the fact that it was more than a simple accessory. You needed it, genuinely. As you stepped outside, finally ready to embrace the day, you were almost run over by Pomni. The jester girl just barely managed to stop in her tracks. Whoa, 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 whoa. You raised your left hand as your right one was holding the parcel. What's wrong? The adventure's about to start. My alarm didn't go off. Pomni usually was 10 minutes early at the stage area, mostly looking for an exit and to hype herself up. Out of all the characters in the digital circus, she was the only one still looking for an exit. You yourself had reached a sort of nirvana here. You accepted this new reality. And while you didn't remember anything from your past life, you did have the foreboding feeling that everything here was better than there, so might as well not even bother. In the digital circus, you had become something you hated, mostly because you were experiencing it daily now. You were a vampire, with sickly grey skin, white hair, and blood-red eyes that glowed in the dark. Thankfully, whenever you closed your eyes, set lights turned off, allowing you to sleep. You had 4 razor-sharp fangs in your mouth, a long, slender tongue, and pointy ears. And even though your skin looked sickly and grey, it was incredibly smooth, almost like your body had been carved out of super expensive marble. It was understandable then that light hurt you. That's what the parcel and the sunglasses were for. They allowed you to walk among the others during the day, without a mind-splitting headache due to visual overload. Your name in this world was Betty, as a pun of the name Betty and a bat. It was terrible, but at least you were something substantial. You probably would have a much harder time accepting your reality if you had become something as abstract and weird-looking as Zubul. After you calm Pomni down by patting her head and reassuring her that the adventure hasn't started yet, as the theme song of the digital circus had just started playing, the theme song being more or less played right into everyone's head, waking up even the most tired of characters. So, everything was still fine. Or well, as fine as things got in the digital circus. Entering the stage area, the others were already waiting. "Betty, Pomni, fashionably late, I see," joked Jax, as he watched you approach. Kane was floating on top of the stage, seemingly frozen in an exaggerated pose. "Ah, there you are! I'm so glad everyone is here now!" Kane snapped his fingers. "I was wondering and worried that you'd be missing out on this one." Kane made a little happy dance in the air before spreading out his arms. "As I was saying, today's adventure is the migration of the floating head people," said Kinger out loud. And a silence followed. Well, yes, Kinger." Kane was audibly disappointed. "How did you know?" It's every 2 years on this day specifically, Kane," he stuttered. "And it's one of my favorites." Even though Kinger didn't have a mouth, you could hear his smile, which was kinda precious. "Well," Kane inhaled loudly. "Exactly, today's adventure, as Kinger so eloquently put, is our 3rd migration of the Floating Head People adventure. Allow me to explain. The Floating Head People are exotic creatures who migrate from east to west. It's a beautiful and rare event in the digital circus, and so we get the day off," interrupted Kinger. "Kinger, please. You ruined this for me." "Oh, sorry, Kane." Kane coughed. You don't get the day off. Rather, you have to observe the migration outside. That's it, yeah. Kinger, please never do this again." The chess piece grabbed his own head. "I'm so sorry, Kane." It was about an hour later. You and the others were outside of the digital circus's tent, spread out on 3 separate picnic cloths, with a basket full of snacks on each. A little bored, you were lying on your back like the others. You had your parcel stuck into the ground to give you shade. "I wish I had something fun to read," you muttered, making Pomni giggle. The Jester and Jax were both lying next to you. You'd be sleeping right now if it wasn't so bright. Even with your sunglasses, you could feel it. It was truly a terrible time. What do you guys think they look like?" asked Pomni. She was a little afraid. You looked at her. "Well, I imagine they look like human heads with big wings for ears." The Jester shuddered. "Nah, they look like giant inflated heads, like blimps, with a super tiny body hanging onto them." Jax chuckled. They tried to come up with the most eldritch thing possible that fit with the name Giant Floating Head People. "And you, Pomni?" he asked casually. I don't know. That's the problem." She sighed. "I just don't know anymore." You raised an eyebrow. Seemed like she was still trying to make sense of the circus. How sad. And not in a pathetic way, but more a I feel sorry for you kind of way. And that made your heart sink a little. Hot dogs, anyone? asked Gangle as she reached into the basket of her blanket. She was lying with Zubul on the picnic set up in the middle. Oh, it's just hot dogs. Grinning, Jax reached for your picnic basket, knowing full well that you didn't like the digital circuit's food, and Pomni was way too anxious to even try and distract herself with it. Though as he looked inside, his shoulders slumped. Sure, there were breaded, steaming sausages in soft, sweet buns, but there was no relish or mustard, not even dried onions. Just a bottle of ketchup. It wasn't even spicy ketchup, just no brand tomato squirt. The bunnyman went on his knees. Damn you, Kane! It was as if this was the biggest problem he had faced in his lifetime. Not the being stuck in a digital nightmare world, no. The fact that there were no good hot dog toppings, that was the greatest terror. Meanwhile, Pomni's gaze shifted to you. A bead of sweat ran down your forehead. Have you still not eaten anything? We don't feel hunger. I don't see the point, you responded. And she blinked. It's really helping, to not abstract. You exhaled through your mouth, looking over at the sobbing Jax, who despite his complaints was already shoving them down his gullet, with a thick glob of ketchup on each, while tears ran out of his eyes. Yeah, that wasn't really an appetizing image. Looking down at the jester, you asked, Pomni, what does the digital food taste like to you? Well, it tastes like the food it depicts, just missing all the spices. You looked at her. For obvious reasons, everything just tastes like mud to me. Using a finger, you pushed your upper lip up to reveal one of your fangs. But that's when you were slapped on the chest by Jax. Come on, don't be edgy. Try it. He pointed the hot dog at you. Try it. Groaning, you pushed it away. Shrugging, Jax ate it himself in one go. Pomni, though, blushed, thinking what she said next, maybe, racist. Have you tried blood? You blinked and very subtly blushed, crossing your arms, while Jax coughed loudly. No, the thought disgusts me. Pomni gulped. So you don't even want to try it? You shook your head. I mean, how am I supposed to get blood here? Right. As Pomni looked back at the sky, her eyes turned super small out of fear. From the canopy of the surrounding trees, a massive head was just barely peeking down at your group. Everyone, except for Kinger and Jax, screamed. The head was gigantic, looking like the head of a bald middle-aged man. Its eyes were almost completely white, save for little black pinpricks at the center of each of his eyeballs. After it curiously stared at you and the others, it looked up and floated upwards. Jax was half right. The giant floating head people were in fact giant floating heads, except that they didn't have a tiny body hanging underneath. It really was just a blimp-sized head, with a mouth, functioning eyes, and what you would call a sorrowful expression. Thing is, if it hadn't been for this curious one, the others would have seemed small this far up in the sky. An entire swarm now floated silently above your group. As the curious one floated up, he very soon turned into the same small size as the others. Pomni slapped her hands on her face, screaming in terror. Sighing, Jax quickly got on his feet, and as you were trying to console the jester, he shoved one of his hot dogs in her mouth, shutting her up, for now. Eat it. Calms the nerves. Trust me. He looked at you and winked. Well, I'm bored, said Jax after a good stretch. Hey, Betty. Wanna do something? He winked. Very subtle, Jax, you thought sarcastically. When you had first manifested in the digital circus, you felt like you were starving. A sensation you haven't felt in the digital circus since. It had been a surprise to you, hearing that no one else felt the sensation of hunger. Jax, though, was the only one who noticed something was off about you. And it was him who, after a rather tedious introductory adventure for you, which led to you running around the entirety of the digital circus. Apparently, Ken usually showed everyone around the place in person, but with you he wanted to try something new and exciting. Well, at least he came to the conclusion that this was a little too tedious for a first adventure, and he promised to never do it again. At the time, Jax had pulled you aside, and with the smuggest expression asked you if you felt anything, as he poked your tummy. Embarrassed, you'd explained that you felt hunger. In fact, you were starving. And you could hear his and everyone else's heartbeats. The blood flowing, it was making you mad. And so, Jax had offered himself up, holding out his arm for you to bite it and suck blood from it. Though you haven't felt hunger since the first time you fed on the Bunnyman, it seemed like he liked the experience, and considering eating and sleeping was the best ways to not abstract, which was equal to dying, in the digital circus, whenever an adventurer left you unsatisfied, and everyone was eating right next to you, while you just sat there looking at the food, which arguably did smell good, it just tasted like dirt. Jax would force himself on you, just like he was doing now, to let you feed on him. You followed him back into the circus tent. His hands were behind his head as he leisurely walked, while you crossed your arms in utter embarrassment. Jax always made these noises when you were sucking him, making it a very awkward experience for you. But his blood was absolutely delicious. In fact, you could hear it pump as he walked before you, lazily, agonizingly slow. Salvia was running down your mouth. The problem was that whenever you were alone with another character, it was exceedingly difficult to ignore your digital body's nature and needs. Jax didn't fully understand the extent of your issues, so he was unaware of the danger he was in right now. You didn't even hear the dripping of the wetness in your mouth. Jax was so unaware, so defenseless. Within the blink of an eye, you were right behind him, your teeth appearing longer and sharper than normal as your eyes glowed dangerously bright. Not even his large bunny ears picked up the sounds of you moving. A drop of your salvia landed on his shoulder, and he only caught a glimpse of you before you chomped down on his neck. He gasped in surprise as you pushed him to the ground, your teeth tearing into the flesh of his throat, until his searing pain flushed through him like molten steel. He gurgled a silent scream. Jax didn't fight back. He knew that in the digital circus, nothing physical could kill him. That's why he was so lax all the time. But something about you pinning him down, mercilessly feeding on him, feeling his blood be sucked out of his vital artery, the noise of you gulping down his red liquid, it made his ears clamp down on his head in fear, like a rabbit, like prey that knew the end had come. A sort of paralysis shut down his motor functions to lessen any pain, something carnal from his nature as a bunny that had lied dormant all this time. Every gulp you took of his made your body twitch and pulsate. It was as if your body was being pumped with life. Every muscle beneath your skin strained. You felt so powerful, so full of energy. Jax's breaths were hitched. It was as if he could not decide between inhaling or exhaling. All he felt was pain. This was nothing like the other times. Normally it felt almost sensual. That's why he liked it so much. He was just so used to just eating and distracting himself that he kept forgetting that activity was something unique and special to you, that you couldn't just do all the time. He wondered how much you secretly fought this need, this urge to feed, and considering the strength of your socks around his skin, you were desperate for some entertainment. Desperate for an activity to keep you from abstracting. He started feeling a little lightheaded now, kicking in his survival instincts, weakly, desperately as he reached forward as you fed on him, but your grip was stronger now, stronger than him. He couldn't even move an inch. This had never happened before. Normally it was him who was in control. Now this was going through his fingers like loose sand. Suddenly your bite's strength increased, making him jolt up, his head butting yours, throwing you off of him. Clasping his spewing wound, he crawled forward before standing up. He was out of breath, while you were staggered. "Yo!" he shouted, rubbing his face, fire letting out of his throat, the digital circuits having regenerated his wound. "What the bleep was that?" he shouted. Scared and pouting, you tried to hide from him behind a pillar. "I see you, Betty." "I'm sorry," you sobbed. Jax crossed his arms. "You're sorry." I really am. Please don't tell the others." Jax scoffed, turning around towards the stage area. "Please." "You still have my blood on your face." "Fine. But you owe me one." "Owe you what?" you asked as you rubbed away the blood. He turned to look at you and winked. "You'll know when the time has come." Since then you had been sitting in your dark room, twiddling your thumbs. You heard the others returning, even heard the outro theme muffled through your locked door as the adventure was over. No one had come to see you yet. No knocking on your door, no shouting at you for being a wild loose animal, for attacking a character out of the blue. No, the only knock came now, hours after the fact, after the others had gone to bed. Like a zombie, you walked over to it. And who else but Jack stood before you, hands on his hip, making a sassy pose. He winked at you, smiling. "I'm here for that favor." Confused, you blinked at him, but he just walked up to you, giving you a rather wet peck on the cheek, his lips feeling warm on your cool, smooth skin, making you blush hard. You could still feel it. What do you mean?" His face came closer to your ear, and he whispered, You took advantage of me. Now it's payback. You do whatever you wanted with me. Now I'll do the same. He purred quietly. What are you talking about? You looked at him, but all you saw was him undoing his overall, already having it pulled down to his navel. Take your dress off, he commanded. Her eyes widened as you blushed. He understood, closing the door behind the two of you. This night wasn't over yet. Thank you to the people who are supporting me on Ko-fi. You guys are keeping me alive.